Hi everyone, Mike Uyak here. It's a Sunday afternoon. I've roasted a turkey and now I'm boiling the bones to make some nice turkey stock. Eventually going to turn it into what's become kind of a family favorite, which is my turkey tortilla soup. But while I'm standing around tending to a bubbling pot of stock, I thought it's a good time to stew some prunes. Why? Well, can't make prune whip without stewed prunes, can you?
Prunes are just dried plums, and we've eaten them pretty much as long as human civilization has been around, actually longer. Originally from the Caucasus region near the Caspian Sea, and then spread through Europe and Asia, and then finally into the New World. They've enjoyed a mixed level of popularity over the centuries. They're sweet, and so a lot of people like them. And on the other hand, they've gotten a bit of a reputation for being something that old people eat or the very young. And so in the year 2000, they came up with a new advertising campaign where they started calling them dried plums instead of prunes because they would sell better that way. But today we're here to talk about prune whip. Yeah, that is what it looks like, or what one version of it looks like.
I've run across numerous recipes for prune whip in my research, and it seems it spans numerous decades, and it was both a very popular dessert. It keeps popping up in recipe books all over the place, and reviled in equal measure. Franklin Delano Roosevelt actually banned it from being served in the White House while he was there. So it was a fairly good chunk of time when you would not find prune whip in the White House. That's okay by me, I guess. Some of them use whipped cream as the whipped portion of it. Others, most of them, actually use whipped egg whites. And about 50% of those, basically the basic recipe is pureed stewed prunes and whipped egg white folded together and enjoyed just like that. Others actually bake that mixture, and it's basically just, that's the only difference between the recipes, is you bake that as opposed to eating it raw. I'm going to do the baked version because, I took a look at that and I thought, raw egg whites with stewed prunes, it sounds dicey to me. If the prunes don't make you poop, the salmonella will. And when I actually said that aloud, and my wife just sort of looked up and said, "That's kind of a toilet bowl half full sort of way of looking at things." I love her. I think I'm gonna go for the baked version, and like I said, it really doesn't get any simpler. So here's how we make it.
Start with a cup and a half of pureed stewed prunes. Basically, I just boiled prunes for about 20 minutes, let them cool, and pureed them. And they already look wonderful. To that, add a third of a cup of water, a third of a cup of sugar, and about a quarter cup of lemon juice. Then I put the spurs to it, heat it up until it looks something like this. Once the sugar has completely dissolved and it's smooth, turn the heat off and let it cool for a few minutes. In the meantime, beat 6 egg whites and add about a half a teaspoon of cream of tartar to that. That'll help the egg whites stay stiff. And take your egg whites and fold them into the prune mixture. And learn from my mistake. I'm pretty confident that the purpose of my life is to serve it as an example to others. Use a pot that's actually large enough to hold everything, because the folding process takes some time to begin with, and then if you have a pot that barely holds the contents, the folding process takes that much longer. In any case, once it's all folded together, pour it into a greased baking dish, or a ramekin in this case, since I'm making a small portion, and place in a 300 degree oven for, I'm going to say about an hour. The recipe actually just says until done.
So after about an hour in the oven, I took the prune whip out, let it cool, and it was only at that point that I started to think about what it was that I had actually made. Folding the egg whites in there, I sort of thought of a meringue. But because it was kind of at a relatively low temperature, what it ended up actually being more like was a souffle. It puffed up, and unfortunately I didn't get a photo of it while I was, I wasn't really thinking. And doubly so I wasn't really thinking because I didn't handle it very carefully, and like all souffles do when you don't handle them properly, it did this. So, it's a little disappointing now, but I'm not going to fault this for its lack of structural integrity. That was entirely my fault. So I'm only going to judge this based on flavor and not even on texture, because I kind of screwed that up. But, prune whip. You know what's really weird? It's not bad. But what's really weird is it tastes like bran flakes. It really does. Very, very subtle prune flavor in addition to bran flakes. Which is really weird because there's no bran in this. I mean, there's fiber from the prunes, but there's no bran. There's no flour, there's no grain in this whatsoever. It's really weird. So because it hadn't fully set like it probably should, this has a little bit of a goopy texture. It's sort of like a pudding that hasn't set fully, but because the prunes, the fiber from the prunes is still present there. There's sort of a grittiness that never really goes away. It's not smooth like you would think a puree would be. Yeah, I think if this had set fully, it would be better. It would be light and airy, and have this sort of a bran muffin souffle sort of texture and flavor to it. I think if I did this again, I could actually make it better, but on the whole, I'm not sure I really want to do this again. I think if you want a dessert that incorporates prunes, there are other ways of doing that. Prunes, they're useful all over the place. They're actually used in Moroccan cooking. They add a kind of a fruity fruity element to certain stews and things like that. But as far as desserts are concerned, prunes really kind of have gone away. They've become kind of passé. But there's one place that you can use prunes in a dessert that is classic in a way and yet not. And that's plum pudding. Because what are prunes but dried plums? So English plum pudding. Let's talk about that for a moment. Now, what has become traditional for the English plum pudding is a favorite Christmas time treat. It's basically it's a steamed dessert. They say boiled, but it's really not boiled. The thing with it is that it doesn't have plums in it or prunes. It has raisins. Reason being that 17th, 18th century, thereabouts, the word plum came to mean any dried fruit, not just prunes. So it came to also mean raisins, whatever. And specifically in a plum pudding, the word plum came to mean raisins. It used to have plums in it, actual plums or dried prunes, but gradually raisins became more in vogue, possibly because they were, imported. They were special, um, and so raisins became the traditional dried fruit, in addition to like currants and things, that you put in a plum pudding. But it used to be plums, and there's no reason why you can't still do it. So here's my sort of non-Christmassy version of a traditional English plum pudding, micro-sized. I'm only going to do small portions of a plum pudding rather than a full thing, because you usually do like a full baking dish that has like 10, 12 servings in it. I don't want that much dessert around because that's the last thing I need. So I'm going to do individual portions of plum pudding using actual plums or dried prunes. And in this case, since I've already made a big batch, stewed prunes. Let's get started.
In a mixing bowl, combine 2 cups of all-purpose flour with your spice mix. I have here 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of nutmeg, about a half a teaspoon of allspice and a half teaspoon of clove, 1/4 cup of diced candied ginger, and a 1/4 cup of sugar, just regular white sugar. To that add about a half a cup of brown sugar and about a half a teaspoon of baking soda. Just going to break up the chunks of brown sugar so it mixes together a little bit more evenly. Next, add about 1.5 cups of stewed prunes that I've just sort of roughly chopped. And I'm adding about 1/3 cup of the liquid that I use to stew the prunes with. There's no reason why we need to lose that lovely pruny flavor. And I'm just going to kind of fold this all together until everything's moistened. I don't want to overwork this because the flour, I don't want to develop gluten in the flour and make it tough. So just until I don't see any dry bits anymore. I've let my egg whites sit around for too long, so they've kind of collapsed. I'm going to rebeat them. And they're about 2 egg whites beaten. I'm going to fold them together with the rest of the batter there until it's nice and smooth. Next, I take some ramekins. I've rubbed them down with butter. I'm just going to sprinkle some sugar in here and roll them around to make sure the sugar sticks and coats the entire ramekin. Do not be lazy like I did. Get yourself an actual spoon so that you have a better chance that your batter will actually make it into the ramekins. You'll have a better chance of making less of a mess. But anyway, fill the ramekins about 3/4 of the way full. They will expand a little bit in the process of steaming. Next, cover each of the ramekins with some aluminum foil, and then take some butcher's twine and just tie around to make sure they stay. And again, learn from my example, just cut yourself a nice good length so that your giant ham hands can actually tie a knot without fiddling with it too much. It's not that expensive. Don't be too precious with this. It also helps if you tie a surgeon's knot, which is basically like the granny knot I did, except that you wrap it around a couple more times. That helps to hold it in place while you're tying it, so you don't need 3 hands. Once you've got them all covered, place the ramekins into a pan of boiling water. Make sure that the level of the water is only about halfway up the sides of the ramekins. We don't want these to actually be submerged, obviously. Cover and boil for about 2 hours. Once boiled, let them remove from the hot water and let them cool for a little while, and then turn out onto a clean plate and use a creme anglaise or a rum sauce of your choice. The English call it a hard sauce.
I like the plum pudding much better. It's moist, but it's got a lot more body to it because it is actually a flour-based dessert. It's got more structural integrity to it. The prunes, along with the candied ginger they put in here and the brown sugar, really combines to give it a really nice, rich flavor. And the rum sauce, I need to work on that a little bit. It's a little bit too alcoholic, I think, but some people might not think that's a problem. But I think this is definitely an improvement over the Prune Whip. Now, if Prune Whip is your jam, hey, go for it. It's very old school. It survived this long for a reason. Some people actually like it. For my money, it's not that difficult, so it's not really a matter of too much work for what you get, but when you make something that tastes like a bran muffin, you might as well just have a bran muffin, and especially when it's a goopy bran muffin. If you actually have, I just made a mess, a dessert that's actually steeped in English tradition with a little bit of a modern flair to it, and you can actually make single servings instead of a giant thing that has 10 or 12 servings in it. I think that's really a winner. There's really no negative to it. So, with that, I'd like to thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, once again, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and give me suggestions for more episodes of Recipe Redemption. Until next time, this is Mike Uyak. Thanks for watching.